All right, everyone, I'll go ahead and begin. I know the topic today is of much interest to everyone, so I wanted to make sure that we have enough time. You are attending the July DELN meeting. Welcome. Thank you for joining us and making time today. I'll be going through some brief updates. I'll try to make it as quick as possible because I know our presenters have a lot to talk about today. So, and just to let everyone know, we are recording this meeting and it will be shared out afterwards. I wanted to start with the introduction of DELN. We are a coalition, or a collaboration of community-based organizations, public-private institutions, and individuals invested in digital equity within our region, and we do provide opportunities to connect our local digital equity community to share resources, create partnerships, and gain knowledge of best practices. And we're also here to increase awareness and support for community efforts. What is digital inclusion? The activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. This includes affordable and robust broadband internet services, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, access to digital literacy training, quality technical support, and applications and online content designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. This is the definition from NTIA. How can you support DELN? You can participate in our bi-monthly virtual meetings, which you're attending right now. You're also invited to join our listserv and participate in our community Google form, participate in our community. And there's a link here to our Google form that you're welcome to sign up for free membership and also be part of the listserv where you get notifications. Within the last couple months, we have started sending out weekly updates. Again, we aim for weekly updates regarding local, regional digital equity efforts. You can also partner with the ELN to advocate for more resources for digital equity, and you can join a working group for advocacy or program planning and membership. Those meet monthly. And make sure to follow this link. I can share it in the chat as well to be listed on our website as a member. Today, we will be hearing from Lisa Heaton with Washington State Department of Commerce and Darryl Hunt with King County as they present local digital equity updates and digital equity capacity grant and competitive grant readiness. Afterwards, you're welcome to put any questions in the chat. I will try to make sure Lisa and Darryl get them as appropriate. We'll also take a moment after each presentation to ask questions. We won't go too long on the questions after each presentation, just because we want to make sure there's time for both presenters to speak. I'm hoping that there'll be some time at the end for some Q&A and also breakout rooms where you can meet with Lisa and Darryl individually. And then we also have a breakout room for anyone interested in networking for coalition building. Again, today we will be talking about digital equity capacity and competitive grant readiness, as well as some regional digital equity updates. I am going to go ahead and pass this over to Lisa Heaton. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll stop my share and you are welcome to take over.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting us, Catherine. Really appreciate it. And this is a great opportunity for us to share information about upcoming grant opportunities. I'd also, my name is Lisa Heaton, as was mentioned. I work with the State Broadband Office at the Department of Commerce. I use she, her pronouns. And I'd also like to introduce Sarah Clark. She's our Broadband Equity Contracts and Operations Manager. So she's here with me today. She's helping me with the slides. And so thank you, Sarah. And she will be helping in chat. So later on, if we go into the breakout rooms, she and I can assist with those questions with those particular groups of folks. That'd be great. So thank you again. I appreciate it. So next slide, Sarah, and then the following. Okay, so just to give you a broad overview of what we're covering here in the next 15-20 minutes, I'll go over the Digital Equity Act programs as they're administered by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA. And just to be clear, these are federal programs as opposed to state. And then next, I'll cover the status of Washington State Broadband Office's application for the NTIA Digital Equity Capacity Grant, kind of where things are at right now. And third, how do you prepare for the NTIA Digital Equity Capacity Grant? And fourth, how do you prepare for the NTIA Competitive Digital Equity Competitive Grant? And I know Darryl and I chatted yesterday, so he's got more in-depth information about the competitive grant and tips that he'll specifically share on that. So I won't cover too much on that. And then the digital equity dashboard is now live, so I will share kind of, if you haven't accessed that tool, I'll share the link. And lastly, we will have office hours on July 31st, so I will give some more specific information about that. So next slide, please. So just to give you an overview of where we're at with the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, as many of you probably saw, the feds announced that Nevada was the first approved Digital Equity Capacity Grant application, and that happened June 26th. So the funding opportunity does indicate that the statutory requirement for that NOFO, it'll be out within 30 days. So for folks who are wanting to know about the capacity grant, when that will be coming out, you just need to count backwards and probably around July 25th. So more tips on that I know Darryl will cover on that, and there's specific things that folks can do to get ready for that particular grant. But that notice from the NTIA about Nevada contains some important information about getting ready for the capacity grant. The Digital Equity Act programs, there are 3 programs that the feds have as part of the $2.75 billion in federal funds. And just to clarify, the Digital Equity Act at the federal level has these 3 grant programs, and they're all meant to promote digital equity and inclusion. First was the State Digital Equity Planning Grant, and Washington State was allocated over $1 million to develop the state digital equity plan. And at the national level, it was a $60 million formula grant for states, territories, and tribal governments so that they could develop their digital equity plans. And so that's what we used to create that plan that was approved earlier this year. Second is the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, which is what we have applied for right now. And third is the Digital Equity Competitive Grant, which I just mentioned a few items on. And lastly, this whole package of 3 federal programs is meant to ensure that all people, all communities have the skills, technology, and the ability to take advantage of the full benefits of the digital economy. So taken together at the national level, you have the Digital Equity Planning Grant, $60 million, Digital Equity Capacity Grant, $1.44 billion, and the Digital Equity Competitive Grant for $1.25 billion at the national level. So I will cover a little more on each of these. The next slide, please. As I mentioned, this is the information that you need to count backwards for the Digital Equity Competitive Grant. That notice was in the email that came out from the feds about the announcement that Nevada was awarded the Digital Equity Capacity Grant. And Darryl will share more on that. Next slide, please. And one of the important things if you read the notice of funding opportunity for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, this second program that the feds have made available, the purpose is to put digital equity plans into action. So states and territories, one of the requirements that came in the notice of funding opportunity was to ensure that we are reaching all covered populations within the state. So each of the covered populations that are stated in the digital equity plan, and that includes 2 additional ones that aren't required by the NTA, but are also indicated in our state plan, are children and youth in foster care, and individuals experiencing housing instability. Next slide, please. So how did the NTIA determine what the amount of funding that we got? The 15.9 million that we did receive from that we were notified that we were awarded by the NTIA. It's based on 50% based on the total population, 25% based on the covered population if you compare to other covered populations in all states, and 25% was based on the comparative lack of broadband availability and adoption in comparison to other eligible states. So that wasn't something that we could change. That was something that was determined by the feds when they announced that $15.9 million. Who can receive these funds? We, of course, are one of the eligible states, District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, and then there's a 1% territory set aside. So and to reiterate, there are three important ones that we had to make sure that were in the application, and there were many other requirements in the notice of funding opportunity. They require one or more strategies of the digital equity plan must be addressed. And they also wanted to make sure that the application cannot include activities that would supplant or duplicate the current funding that we have. For example, the state funds that we currently have for digital navigation services, those cannot be supplanted by these funds. So what we had to do was look at, okay, the requirements in the notice of funding opportunity, what is an area that wouldn't supplant those activities that are currently funded at the state level? Because the feds want to ensure various funding streams, that it's not just the NTIA grants that are going to cover it all, because of course they wouldn't be able to do so, but what are the other sources of funding that we have at the state level? And the third important one that we looked at was a description on how all covered populations will benefit from this funding. So we had to make sure in our application how each of the covered populations that I just showed on the previous slide, how would we address the specific needs of each covered population in the application. And if you look at the notice of funding opportunity, and it's on pages 27 to 31, it requires like a detailed project plan with project activities, timelines, key milestones from start to end, a description of how the benefits for each of the covered populations will be measured, a description of how the project success will be measured across digital equity outcomes, and a summary of the activities and the barriers to digital equity the project will address. So those are kind of the highlights of what we had to address in that application. So if you're interested in more details, please take a peek at pages 27 to 31 in the notice of funding opportunity. Next slide, please. And there is a one-pager on the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, and we've provided links on slides 15 and 16 on this slide deck, which will be shared with you afterwards. And it gives a nice overview. And so on that one pager, it explains that the grant funds can be spent using NTIA funds to update or maintain the digital equity plans, implement these plans, to make subgrants to eligible entities, and to evaluate the efficacy of efforts funded by grants that can be made to subgrantees. And it also includes the ability to pay for administrative costs. So in this grant, states must spend down the grant funds within a 5-year period of performance. So that's the kind of goalpost that we had to work with. We submitted our application just before the deadline, the May 28th deadline this year, and we expect an announcement by the NTIA by August 28th. It's in what they call the curing process right now. They could come back with questions. They could come back with, several times. We don't know exactly until they make the award announcement. And the latest date that we are assured is by August 28th. Next slide, please. So one of the suggestions, if you want to prepare for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, is to review the state digital equity plan and review the vision, the goals, the strategies, the measurable objectives. And I also just wanted to make a clarification because it is confusing. There is a state and federal Digital Equity Act. And so what I'm referencing here is the federal one that is funded through the NTIA. There is also a state Digital Equity Act, which is in RCW 43-330-539, and that refers to a state digital equity plan. So there isn't any funding particularly for that state plan, and what we're referencing here is the federal plan that is approved by the NTIA. So if you want to prepare, take a look at the primary goals for the digital equity plan for eliminating barriers, empowering residents, advancing sustainability, and the sub-objectives to prioritize how different covered populations are disproportionately affected by the digital divide. And so in the plan, take a look at how digital equity is a statewide issue that requires a coordinated, collaborative approach by state agencies, tribal governments, and local governments, community-based organizations, and other key partners. And we know as well that digital equity cannot be achieved in Washington without additional legislative policies and funding. And so one of the key things we need to be thinking about is ways to leverage public-private partnerships. And I know the Digital Equity Forum, that's a key goal that the Digital Equity Forum has in legislation, in law. And also it's something that anybody can do is advocating for these public-private partnerships, because trying to fund the digital divide alone through grants is not really the most coordinated way we could go about this, because there simply isn't enough resources to go around. So we really want to emphasize that these public-private partnerships are really key. Next slide, please. And also in preparing for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, it would be helpful to review the various strategies in the plan and the sub-objectives. So expanding broadband availability and increasing affordability, making sure that all Washington residents have the opportunity to access and afford the broadband service. And related to the second strategy, we want to make sure that all Washington residents can access and afford the devices they need to maintain their digital connectivity. And in regards to the third strategy, how do we support inclusive practices that allow access to digital services for everyone? And fourth, how do we ensure that all Washington residents have opportunities to acquire these skills and understand so they can participate in digital connectivity activities? And fifth, how do we advance measures that protect Washington residents from online, who want to navigate safely and securely online in the face of cyber threats? And lastly, how do we build partnerships with tribal governments, state agencies, local governments, community-based organizations, businesses, and other digital equity-focused organizations to be able to sustain this digital equity work? So that strategy of embedding digital equity into the larger statewide effort to advance sustainability is key in this effort. Next slide, please. So what happens next with the Digital Equity Capacity Grant? As I mentioned earlier, the NTIA announced that the grant award to WASBA will be no later than August 28th. It could be before then. We've checked with Tracy Blackburn, our federal program officer, and she said that the NTIA will issue parameters on public communications and when they will announce the final approval. And we would like to publish this information as soon as we can make this available, but we're waiting for the go-ahead from the NTIA on what they'll allow us to do. And then we will issue a competitive request for proposals and send that out via Gov Delivery. So please sign up now. We also have a link and information on this slide deck to sign up for those notifications if you don't already receive them. And then the NTIA will issue additional notices of funding opportunities. This is not the final digital inclusion related notice of funding opportunity that will be issued, because trying to to use 15.9 million to fully implement the digital equity plan is not possible with this limited amount of money. So there will be other notices of funding opportunity issued by the NTIA for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. So that was in the notice of funding opportunity with this digital equity capacity grant. So that's just a heads up. We don't have a crystal ball to know what's in those notices of funding opportunity that will be coming up. So just stay tuned. Next slide, please. And there will be an NTI webinar update on Digital Equity Act grant programs, and I've included the link here for registering for that webinar. It will be Thursday, July 25th at 11 a.m., and that's Pacific time. And they'll cover the next stage in the Digital Equity Act grant programs, which are the capacity grant programs and the competitive grant programs, and how states, local governments, tribal entities, and other partners can reduce barriers to digital equity in their communities. So they'll talk about kind of resources that are available through the Internet for All initiative. So I've provided a link to that webinar in the slide deck, so you can register for that. Next slide, please. Yep. And I also wanted to share the news, if you haven't already seen, that the Digital Equity Dashboard is live. It went live toward the end of May. This is a great opportunity to use data for grant applications to target services in your area, in your county, in your city, anywhere in the state. I also want to recognize the role of many members. I know Darryl Hunt, David Keys, Representative Gregerson, and there are many people that before my time in joining Commerce who were part of the process of advocating for this tool and getting a decision package passed by the legislature. And it was the role of the IAC team, the Internet Access Crisis Team. And this is a tool that displays and guides broadband infrastructure and digital equity work across the state. The audience is any resident in Washington, community organizations, nonprofits, state, city, local governments can use this hub. It provides a host of information and general tips on finding discounted internet service or digital services, even contacting public utility districts to ask about discounted subscription rates, and a host of other things. It does currently contain ACP data, Affordable Connectivity Program data, but we know the funding for that program is no longer available. So once the Federal Communications Commission makes available Lifeline data, we'd love to populate it with that data so we can provide that information on this tool. So we are also planning to add digital navigator data from the grantees that are finishing up this contract year and going into the next contract year to add during this next phase. So going forward this next year, we will be working with our grantees to populate the digital equity dashboard with that data. So if you haven't checked it out already, please send feedback to us at the email broadbandequity@commerce.wa.gov. And I provided a link to that on this slide. And next slide, please. And lastly, we will engage, if you have other questions, you're free to email them to us. Engage with us at an upcoming office hour session on Wednesday, July 31st at 3:30 for an hour. And we will walk through how Commerce plans through the legislative process, from creating a decision package all the way through agency request legislation. And then from there, it goes to the Office of Financial Management and then to the governor for approval. It's been a very internal process right now. So some of the ideas we have been listening to from partners, and during the last legislation percolate through our agency, we write up some ideas for our director to approve. And we just got approval for those ideas. And so we will be sharing a link later on to a survey early next week, to a survey with the various decision packages that we have that we'd like to put forward. And we want to hear your ideas on that. And you can sign up at internetforall@commerce.wa.gov to receive the Zoom Zoom registration link. So, and as I mentioned earlier, here's a host of links to the state broadband resources. They're all hyperlinks in here. So once DELN has kindly offered to make this available on your website, so you can access each of these hyperlinks and don't have to search all over the place. And then next slide, please. You also have links to the NTIA resources, the webpage and the Digital Equity Act programs that I just went over, the capacity grant, notice of funding opportunity, the one pager. They have a set of FAQs and also a competitive grant one pager. So thank you very much. Just went through that very quickly, and I don't want to take too much time. I know it's 12:28. So Catherine, thank you for inviting us. I can't say there are questions, but I know Sarah's been helping out with that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. I'd like to invite anyone who has questions for Lisa to ask them now. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, Marisol.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. Just a quick
Sure.
question. What process do you think State Broadband Office might implement for feedback recommendations in terms of, the whole RFP, process in terms of, we know that the 2023 process was challenging. So I'm just curious in terms of, how you might embed your team recommendations that might be coming from the organizations that were part of the process last year and may have, feedback for improvements.
Yeah, and thank you, Marisol, for that question. Because I was coming on brand new just as the grants that were provided and for this last funding cycle for the Digital Navigator grants, and we heard a lot of feedback about that process. So going forward, the digital equity, are you referencing particularly the digital equity capacity grant or just grants in general, just to make sure I'm answering your question?
Yeah, the capacity grant, the one that you expect to release, sometime, this summer or early fall.
Yeah, and Sarah Clark is with us, and she also has some tips to prepare. So she just put them in the chat. So additional tips to prepare for applying for those grants to make it easier for everybody. So we don't, going forward, we will provide more information once we have it. We're working with the NTIA to see kind of what they will allow us in terms of engagement. But right now we will be issuing the request for funding opportunities. So Sarah, I didn't know if you wanted to share anything on that point.
I don't have anything to add on that point, but I just wanted to let you all know that if you're interested in applying for the digital equity capacity funding, that you need 3 pieces of information. You need to have your SAM unique ID number, which I've been told if you're interested, you better apply for it sooner rather than later, just because of processing delays on the federal government side. And then make sure that you have your statewide vendor number and UBI number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I see the question from Vicky, the 15.9 million, that is over 5 years. The notice of funding opportunity said that there's 5 years to spread that out over.
And Lisa, I'd like to turn our attention to Maria. She has her hand up, and just to make sure that there's some time left for Darryl's presentation, or enough time left for Darryl's presentation, we'll just have Maria's be the last question. We can save the rest for the Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I had a question around the capacity grant. You talked about the NTIA not allowing the digital navigation program basically to be a supplement or piggyback or overlap. So I was just wondering about digital skills, whether or not the digital navigators can still be teaching digital skills to the general population and still be eligible for the capacity grant through the state broadband office.
Yeah, I can't really speak to who is going to, I think the important thing is once the RFP comes out, to take a good, careful look at it. The requirement that we were asked to address in the notice of funding, we couldn't put anything in the application that would supplant or replicate or duplicate the current activities funded by the state. So that was sort of going through the digital equity plan and seeing what we are currently funding versus what we're not currently funding is key. So take a look at the digital equity plan to see kind of what are the areas that are possible gaps, and take a good look at the request for funding opportunity, request for proposals once that comes out.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you, Lisa. And just to let everyone know, for DELN members, I will be organizing a page on the site for readiness, for the capacity and competitive grant readiness. It's not ready yet, but when it is, I'll let everyone know via the listserv. So sign up if you're not already part of that group. And now I'm going to turn it over to Darryl Hunt with King County IT.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. And I wanted to thank Lisa and her team for being great partners at the state. We're all in this together, learning as we go. And so timely communication is really critical. Also want to congratulate Catherine on her position over at DELN. She's jumped in feet first and been a great asset to digital equity partners and activities that are currently going on. I will share my screen. Hold on one second. I do need to grab my my battery pack. So let me do that real quick. It'll take probably 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
And Katrina, I just wanted to say, I do see your question in the chat. I think that let's still save it maybe for the end or for a breakout room. I just want to make sure it gets, oh, it looks like Sarah's answering it here. Okay, sorry, just trying to follow this thread.
Okay, I'm back. So if you have questions, I'd appreciate it if you put them into the chat. Since we have limited time, I can follow up on the questions after this session. But let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me go into presentation mode. Okay, so to start out, I wanted to provide some insight on the role of King County and our activities in the digital equity space. We have about 30% of the state population in Washington state. So this topic is really important to us. So we've got populations in urban, suburban, and rural areas that are impacted by the digital divide. Historically, we provided grants. We've conducted countywide digital equity studies on the digital divide, but more importantly, we're working closely with the City of Seattle, WDC, DELN, others in the state as advocates around digital equity for county residents, and also as supporters of community anchor institutions, community-based organizations. And I feel that we're all partners in local planning and coordination to implement both local and the Washington State Digital Equity Plan and programs. During my November 23rd presentation to DELN, we talked about a couple topics. We talked about DELN's input into the local community action report, which helped inform the state digital equity plan, along with 30 other counties that contributed, plus tribal reservations. We talked about the importance of reading the state plan as future federal funding opportunities began to release, and that's happening now. We also covered several next step actions, and I'll update you on those topics during this meeting today. Just so that we're grounded on who we're here to help and why, the state developed digital equity plan, and I know that we all share the same goal of delivering services to populations impacted by the digital divide. But in 2021, the Digital Equity Act defined this term called the covered population. It was defined to identify populations most likely to be impacted by the digital divide. In the most current 2022 census data, there's more than 6 million people in Washington state in this covered population category. Based on national data tracking participation in services like TANF and SNAP and Medicaid and SSI, we know that every single person in the covered population category aren't in need of digital equity services. And so through programs like I just mentioned, we believe that there's an average of about 35% of people in the population that participate in these programs. So we expect that probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35% of the covered population will be in need of digital equity services. And so that's a pretty significant number. Just to give you another example, for the ACP program, as an example, in King County, participation was between 21 and 41%, depending on the number of eligible households used in the math formula. So we think we're right in range with sort of our estimation as to what percent of the covered population needs digital equity services. So there's a lot more information in this slide, which will be sent to you after our presentation. If you have any questions, I'll make sure you have my contact information to reach me directly. So let's jump into the topic of federal funding opportunities. Lisa talked about the competitive grant. I've listed some additional resources here. Since award of the first capacity grant to Nevada, it triggered the 30-day shot clock for publishing the competitive grant NOFO. I placed the Nevada award that happened on June 26 here for reading and reference if you're interested in it. But we expect to see the competitive grant NOFO, Lisa indicated, towards the end of this month, which is right on target and within the 30-day shot clock window. I won't spend a lot of time on the capacity grant, but for the competitive grant, we expect to again have the NOFO published at the end of June. Unlike the competitive grant, which goes directly to the state, the competitive grant is open to almost everyone. And the NTA provides some tips, which are here in this chart, will be in the presentation as links for you for applying. And there's roughly 4 links in the box to the right that will give you some additional tips and resources to help you understand the process and get you prepared. So Lisa talked about starting now. And so we think this is important because for those of you who have engaged with the federal government, the process could be fairly complex. And I know I've gone through this process myself. So as soon as you can, you need to set up your accounts. through sam.gov. You need to ensure you have your unique entity identifier. It's the equivalent of a social security number for your business. And they're suggesting that you decide, who's really going to have access to the sam.gov account, because it does require some point of contact information. Getting organized, NTIA is asking you to prepare early and submit your applications early. They're also suggesting that you look at building partnerships, and I think this is a good opportunity for DELN. In the box to the right, the most important information is the U.S. General Services recently released a draft application for the Digital Equity Competitive Grant. And so as soon as you can, look for that, look for the link and then go to the application so that you can familiarize yourself around sort of the requirements that they're asking for in an application. This slide is more for DLN. If all of you remember, some time ago in June of, in 2023, I think it was June, July, we completed what was a local action report that helped inform development of the state's digital equity plan. And these were the organizations that contributed. So we know there's going to be a lot of interest in the competitive grant. And so this may be an opportunity for DELN to convene the membership and talk about how to approach the competitive grant process. But everyone is encouraged to apply. There's a couple things that we are hearing about the competitive grant. One is that grant applications should range in size, greater than $5 to $10 million. The application should be a collaboration or a coalition representing regional, multi-regional geographies. Locally, as far as I can tell, no coalitions to date have developed in or around the King County area. However, we do have past models like the WDC Digital Navigator Program to base future models from. One thing to note is that King County does not plan to submit a direct application. We may act as a partner in an application like we did with WDC. But we can also provide letters of support to applications if you think that will strengthen your application to NTIA. Topic number two. Is important because the last round of grants from the state, there was some controversy and some folks were a little upset with regards to the process and not being able to fully participate in receiving funds to either launch a new digital navigator program or just simply extend the existing work that was done in the past grant into the 2024 calendar year. And so in terms of advocacy, we wanted to ensure that there was someone locally representing and advocating for equitable distribution of funds to help ensure that there's local planning, coordination, and implementation of digital inclusion programs that were either locally developed or taken directly from the state's digital equity plan. We believe that, and so these were some of the key recommendations we made to the Department of Commerce. And I'll just highlight just a couple of them. And you can go through the remainder and touch base with me for any questions that you may have. But one of the things, number 3, that we thought was important was the equitable distribution of grants. We want to make sure that that the covered population that these programs are targeted to serve actually receive money locally so that those populations can be served. And so we want to make sure that there's a plan for equitable and fair allocation of the state, federal grant funds that's based on each county's percent of the covered population as defined within the State Digital Equity Plan and by NTIA. Again, we think that covered population is important and it's where the greatest need exists. The second item we thought was important was the requirement to have grant applications accompanied with county letters of support. And the reason we think this is important is because, you know, as the county and cities and others are planning locally, local coordination and implementation of plans and making sure that we support the covered populations is one way to ensure that local entities are working together, and having a letter of support from a local jurisdiction will help show that the local coordination is happening. And so that is, I think it's important to the state to make sure that that's happening. Another topic that we thought was important was that there's been some limited funding for fixed wireless networks. There's one in Tukwila and there's one in the Spokane school district. And we think that there should be more projects that are fixed wireless based that qualify for some of these digital equity funds. So in our July 9th meeting with the state, we discussed some of our recommendations, and they came back, and I just listed here some key points and themes from that meeting, and I'll just cover a couple. One is that, you know, they are considering our suggestions for future grants, future funding opportunities, should consider equitable distribution formulas. And they aim to incorporate key themes and ensure local jurisdiction support. The next steps is, you know, is reviewing lessons learned from previous efforts, ensuring that there's timely communication for engagement opportunities. This is an important one where I think Metasol asked, how is the state going to incorporate feedback into future grant models? There is interest in developing a framework for engagement for all levels of partners with the state. And so this work is ongoing, is happening at the same time funding grants are happening. And so I think it's important just to make sure that, you know, we have some patience, but we look for results as well. So my third and fourth topic is one centered around the need for digital equity funding. As I stated, we have a significant covered population. We have really limited funds. You know, the funds that are available today through Department of Commerce are a drop in the bucket in terms of what is needed. And so there's been a lot of work on developing a digital equity funding need for King County and Washington State. And so, you know, why is the funding need estimate right now, even with all of the work that was done around the state digital equity plan and all of the work that was done at the local organizations through BATS, we really didn't understand how much money was needed to resolve these digital equity challenges. And so one of the things that we did was we developed the funding need to really understand the cost of achieving digital equity in Washington State. And we knew that that federal funds and state funds alone are really insufficient for resolving the digital divide challenges. And so our funding need analysis, which I will forward to Catherine for distribution, roughly talks about if we're going to do digital inclusion programs for internet access, device access, digital navigation, literacy training, and other digital equity services, we're going to need roughly $600 million over 5 years. So that's a pretty significant amount of money. And so a lot of work that's happening in a group called the Washington Digital Equity Partners Group is where not only did we develop the analysis around the cost of digital equity, but we're trying to look for revenue generation ideas that could help fund the balance of the monies needed to apply towards digital equity solutions. So again, we know federal funds are insufficient. Other funding sources need to be developed, and we're working on those. And so there's more information that I think we'll be able to report out to you in the future months. So our next steps, and I think this is probably one of my last slide, is that we do need a plan and a framework for local and state implementation of the state digital equity plan. We have a plan. We have some money. But we do need an approach to how we're going to make sure we reach all of the covered population. I will also work on getting you information back on sort of our progress on the equitable distribution of grants. So that'll be an ongoing conversation with the state. Also, updates on efforts related to the competitive grant. I know DELN is going to stand up a resource page for you. And so that may be something I don't need to report on, but if there's any information that we feel is important that's not in the resource page, we'll either make sure it's there or we'll communicate it out. And then we'll also continue to report to you on our progress to develop statewide funding strategies and sources as we move forward in our effort to, build out digital inclusion services. This is not a one-year process. This is a multi-year effort that is 5+ years. And so we have some time to do the work, but we have people that are being impacted now. So executing now on whatever we can is important. So time is of the essence. I believe that concludes my presentation. And again, if you have questions, I'll make sure I get to them. Maybe not after this presentation, but I'll make sure I respond to each question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darryl, for all that great information. And Lisa as well. Now we have 2 minutes left. I know everybody is either running off to lunch or probably another meeting. So I'm not sure if we have time for breakout rooms today, but I would like to gauge everyone's interest. So please feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand if you're interested in maybe some subgroups regarding networking, like for coalition building. I think some people definitely are. But I would like to leave the last 2 minutes for some additional questions that might be in the chat, and I can find them. Vicky Yuki had asked about if anyone has an idea of who in Washington State plans on applying. Here, I think that list, Darryl, that you shared about who was part of that that survey group kind of identified maybe who might be planning on applying. And I just wanted to say that I think that you know, as far as where DELN stands on it, we're happy to kind of be the group that helps to organize people into like understanding how to go after this grant money. So, and I think that will evolve as we move forward. Any other questions? Let's see.
Catherine, I have a question for
Sure.
Lisa, if there's just a quick question. So thanks, Lisa, for your presentation. So for the 2024 Digital Navigator grants that were awarded by Commerce, what is the dollar amount of investment in King County, not the amount of funding that King County organizations receive, but what is the dollar amount of those projects that were invested in King County for King County residents? So if the applications have Digital Navigator services, is that a duplication of those funds that were awarded? And so going back to Maria's question, so the applications will not include Digital Navigator projects because the Digital Navigator projects were funded through the 2024 grant. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Yeah, I was trying to follow the logic of what you were saying. So you're asking how, if any dollars were received for King County, would that be an issue for applying for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant? Or
no. So the question is that the Digital Navigator, the 2024 Digital Navigator grants from Commerce, it wasn't clear that there was any investment that serves King County residents with that funding. So it was awarded to King County organizations, but it wasn't clear which residents in King County would be served. And so, like, according to, looking at Darryl's census tract data, it's like 20% of these covered populations live in King County from Washington State. So of that investment in the 2024 Digital Navigator awardees, was it like, what is the dollar amount of that was invested in King County? And then if that dollar amount, if there were no King County residents served, let's just say, by that funding, can King County organizations then apply for funds for Digital Navigator work that doesn't duplicate the awards that were awarded in 2024?
Yeah.
Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and jump in on this one.
Hi, please go ahead.
I'm Sarah Clark, and I'm currently working the Digital Navigator program, and I can't give you a clear answer on that one because I need to do a little bit of digging into kind of like where the dollars went. So if you can write me an email so that I can get you that specific information, I can't answer that right off the top, but if I can get that information to you, then I think we can help get a clear answer for you about whether or not it would be duplicative for you to apply for a competitive capacity grant versus a Digital Navigator program.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah. And I know we're running out of time, so I just put my email there. So just if you can send that along in writing, and then we can give you a more precise answer.
Thank you for your interest in coalition building. I've taken down everyone's name. If you want to connect with me separately, I'm just gonna pop my email in there. I hope I spelled it right. You can find me there. But again, thank you so much, Darryl and Lisa, for your time and your preparation and educating everyone here regarding the capacity and competitive grants and other local updates. We really appreciate it. Look out for the September meeting announcement coming soon. It'll be September 19th, and I'll provide more updates if you're part of the listserv as well. And follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.